The new governess spoke 7 languages and played chess, but the prince discovered who she really was. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man of considerable fortune must be in want of a wife. It is equally acknowledged, though perhaps less universally, that a young woman of good breeding but diminished circumstances must be in want of a wealthy husband. What is far less acknowledged, indeed, what is scarcely spoken of in polite society, is what becomes of those young women whose circumstances have become so drastically diminished that they must seek employment rather than husbands. Such was the predicament of Miss Diana Montague, who found herself, on a particularly dreary Tuesday morning, seated in the drawing-room of Pembrooke Hall, being interviewed for the position of governess. "You speak 7 languages, Miss Montague." Lady Pembroke peered at the references before her with a mixture of suspicion and awe. "Yes, my lady. English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, Greek, and Latin," Diana replied, her posture impeccable despite the discomfort of being scrutinized like a curious specimen. "And you play the pianoforte, the harp, and you are proficient at chess." "I am, my lady." Lady Pembroke exchanged glances with her husband, Lord Pembroke, who merely raised an eyebrow in response. Their 10-year-old daughter, Lady Sophia, would certainly benefit from such extensive knowledge, but a governess with accomplishments that outshone most young ladies of the ton was somewhat unseemly. "Your references are quite impressive, Miss Montague." "The Countess of Willoughby speaks very highly of your abilities," Lady Pembroke continued, though Diana knew this was a fabrication, as she had written the reference herself. The Countess, her godmother, had passed away 6 months prior, leaving Diana with nothing but fond memories and an extensive education that would be put to better use securing a husband than educating other people's children. Yet here she was, applying for a position as governess, for what else could she do? Her father, a scholar of some renown, had left her with a brilliant mind and not a penny to her name. Her mother had died when Diana was but a child, and any distant relations had made it quite clear they had no room for a penniless orphan, no matter how many languages she spoke. "Very well, Miss Montague," Lord Pembroke said, speaking for the first time since Diana had entered the room. "You may begin tomorrow." Lady Sophia's previous governess left rather abruptly to get married. He said this as though the very idea of marriage was an inconvenience to his household staff. And so, Diana Montague, once the toast of London during her brief and unsuccessful season 3 years prior, became the governess of Lady Sophia Pembroke, a position that required her to be invisible to society and, more importantly, to the gentlemen who visited Pembroke Hall. The first few weeks passed uneventfully. Lady Sophia proved to be a bright and eager student, particularly in chess, which she had never been allowed to learn before Diana's arrival. "It's a game for gentlemen, Mamma says," Sophia had confided, "but I think it's splendid fun to capture Papa's knights." Diana found herself enjoying the child's company more than she had anticipated. Sophia was clever and kind-hearted, with none of the petulance Diana had feared in the daughter of such wealthy parents. It was during the 4th week of her employment that the household began preparations for a visit from a very distinguished guest. "His Royal Highness, Prince Zachary of Pemberton, will be joining us for a fortnight," Lady Pembroke announced at breakfast, her voice trembling with barely contained excitement. "He is Lord Pembroke's second cousin, once removed, you know, and has just returned from diplomatic duties in Vienna." Diana nearly choked on her tea, though fortunately no one noticed, as the servants were not meant to react to the conversations of their employers. Prince Zachary of Pemberton. Of all the royal cousins, it had to be him. 3 years ago, during her disastrous London season, Diana had met the prince at the Middleton ball. He had asked her to dance, and they had spent a magical evening in conversation, discussing everything from Plato to Persian poetry. Diana had been captivated by his wit, his intelligence, and, she had to admit, his striking good looks. But when he had suggested they meet again, Diana had panicked. She was a scholar's daughter with no dowry and no connections, and he was a prince. She had fled the ball, leaving nothing but a vague memory of her first name and the faint scent of jasmine in her wake. Now, he was coming to Pembroke Hall, and she was the governess. Diana spent the next 3 days in a state of agitation, meticulously planning how to avoid any encounter with the prince. Governesses were meant to be invisible, after all. Surely, she could remain in the nursery with Sophia during his visit. Surely, he wouldn't recognize her after 3 years, especially in her plain, serviceable gowns. The day of the prince's arrival dawned bright and clear, and the entire household was in a flurry of activity. Diana kept Sophia occupied in the schoolroom, far from the main entrance where the prince would be received. They were deep in a lesson about the kings and queens of England when the door to the schoolroom burst open and Lady Pembroke swept in, followed by a tall, elegantly dressed gentleman. "Sophia, darling, Prince Zachary has arrived and has expressed a particular interest in meeting you," Lady Pembroke said, beaming. Diana kept her eyes fixed on the book before her, praying that the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "And this is Miss Montague, Sophia's governess," Lady Pembroke added, almost as an afterthought. Diana had no choice but to rise and curtsy, her eyes still carefully avoiding the prince's face. "Miss Montague, it is a pleasure," the prince said, his voice just as she remembered it, deep and melodious. Diana murmured an appropriate response, still not meeting his gaze, but she could feel his eyes on her, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Miss Montague has been teaching me to play chess, Your Highness," Sophia piped up, oblivious to the tension in the room. "She is ever so clever and speaks 7 languages." "7 languages? How extraordinary," the prince replied, and Diana could hear the smile in his voice. "Perhaps Miss Montague would honor me with a game of chess during my stay." Before Diana could politely decline, Lady Pembroke intervened. "Oh, Your Highness, I'm sure you would find more suitable companions for chess among the gentlemen who will be joining us for dinner this evening." The prince's response was amiable but firm. "On the contrary, Lady Pembroke, I find that ladies often bring a refreshing perspective to the game. Miss Montague, would tomorrow afternoon suit you?" Trapped, Diana finally looked up, meeting the prince's gaze for the first time. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and Diana knew in that moment that he recognized her. "As Your Highness wishes," she murmured, curtsying again. The prince smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a jolt of electricity through Diana's veins. "Until tomorrow, then, Miss Montague." As soon as the door closed behind the prince and Lady Pembroke, Diana sank into her chair, her mind racing. He knew. He had recognized her, and now he would expose her as the girl who had fled the Middleton ball 3 years ago. Her position, her livelihood, her reputation, all would be ruined. The following afternoon arrived far too quickly for Diana's liking. She had spent a restless night imagining all manner of disastrous scenarios, from being dismissed without a reference to being publicly humiliated in front of the entire household. By the time she made her way to the small library where the chess match was to take place, she was a bundle of nerves. The prince was already there, setting up the chess pieces on a beautiful inlaid board. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Miss Montague," he said, rising to his feet. "I'm delighted you could join me." Diana cursed, her heart pounding. "Your Highness." "Please, sit," he gestured to the chair opposite him. "I've taken the liberty of arranging for tea to be served." Diana sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. The prince resumed his seat, studying her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. "You prefer the white pieces or the black, Miss Montague?" he asked, his tone casual, as if they were merely acquaintances about to enjoy a friendly game. "I have no preference, Your Highness." "Then you shall be white, and have the first move." He rotated the board so that the white pieces were before her. Diana moved a pawn, her fingers trembling slightly. The prince responded with a move of his own, and for a few minutes, they played in silence, each focused on the game. It was only after Diana had captured one of his knights that the prince spoke again. "You play remarkably well, Miss Montague. Just as you did 3 years ago at the Middleton ball, when you defeated Lord Rutherford in 5 moves. Diana's hand froze over the board. So, he did remember her. "Your Highness, you disappeared that night," he continued, his voice low and intense. "I searched for you, you know. All I had was your first name and the memory of your laugh." Diana's cheeks flushed. "I should not have attended that ball, Your Highness. My circumstances were not what they appeared to be." "And what were they, Miss Montague?" For I find myself most curious about the young lady who could discuss Aristotle in fluent Greek one moment and vanish the next. Diana hesitated, then sighed. What did it matter now? Her position was already compromised. My father was Professor Montague of Oxford. A scholar, not a gentleman. He left me well-educated but penniless. My godmother, the Countess of Willoughby, insisted I have one season, though we both knew it was futile. No gentleman of the ton would marry a girl without dowry or connections, no matter how many languages she spoke. The prince's expression softened. And now you are a governess. Yes, your highness. The countess died 6 months ago, and I had nowhere else to go. Diana moved another piece on the board, though her mind was no longer on the game. You might have come to me, the prince said quietly. Diana looked up, startled. To you, your highness. I spent months trying to find you, Diana. May I call you Diana? I feel as though we are beyond formalities at this point. Diana nodded, too surprised to speak. After the ball, I made inquiries, but it seemed as though you had vanished into thin air. No one knew of a Miss Diana who spoke Greek and played chess exceptionally well. I left London immediately after the ball, Diana admitted. I knew it was foolish to think, to hope. To hope what? The prince prompted gently. That someone like you could be interested in someone like me, Diana finished, her voice barely above a whisper. The prince reached across the chessboard, his fingers lightly touching hers. But I was interested, Diana. I still am. Diana withdrew her hand, her heart racing. Your Highness, I am a governess now. Whatever might have been possible 3 years ago is impossible now. Is it? The prince leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. I am in need of a translator for my diplomatic missions. Someone who speaks multiple languages, is well-educated, and can hold their own in negotiations. Someone exactly like you. Diana stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. You're offering me a position? I'm offering you an opportunity, Diana. The rest is up to you. He moved his queen across the board. Check. Diana studied the board, then moved her bishop to block his attack. Your Highness, I'm not sure I understand what you're proposing. Zachary, he corrected. And I'm proposing that you come to Pemberton Palace as my official translator. The position comes with a generous salary, private apartments, and the respect due to a lady of your education and abilities. And what would Lady Pembroke say to that? Diana asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. I doubt she would appreciate losing her daughter's governess to a royal appointment. Lady Pembroke would have no choice but to offer her congratulations, however reluctantly, Zachary replied with a smile. Besides, I believe Lady Sophia would be delighted to visit you at the palace for chess lessons. Diana couldn't help but smile at the thought. She would enjoy that, I think. So, what say you, Diana? Will you accept my offer? Diana hesitated, searching his face for any sign of duplicity. But all she saw was sincerity, and something else, something that made her pulse quicken and her cheeks warm. I accept, Your Highness, Zachary, she said finally. Though I fear the ton will be scandalized by your choice of translator. The ton is perpetually scandalized by something or other, Zachary dismissed with a wave of his hand. Next week it will be Lady Wiltshire's new turban, and they'll forget all about the prince and the governess. Is that what we'll be? The prince and the governess? Diana asked, moving her queen. Check. Zachary studied the board, then looked up at her, his eyes twinkling. For now, perhaps. But I have hopes for a different title in the future. And what might that be? Diana asked, her heart in her throat. The prince and the princess, Zachary replied, moving his king out of danger. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's see if you can win this game. Diana laughed, the sound bright and unrestrained, just as it had been 3 years ago at the Middleton ball. I believe I can, Your Highness. Zachary, he reminded her gently. Zachary, she repeated, savoring the name on her lips. I believe I can win this game, Zachary. And she did, 5 moves later, to the prince's delight and admiration. Word of Diana's appointment spread through Pembroke Hall like wildfire. Lady Pembroke was, as predicted, scandalized but powerless to object. Lady Sophia was devastated until assured that she would be invited to the palace for regular chess lessons. And Lord Pembroke, in a rare display of emotion, congratulated Diana on her good fortune. "Always knew you were meant for greater things than teaching my Sophia," he grumbled. "Though she'll miss you terribly." Diana packed her meagre belongings, said her tearful goodbyes to Lady Sophia, and departed Pembroke Hall in the prince's own carriage, headed for a future she could never have imagined. The Tun, of course, was ablaze with gossip. A governess appointed as royal translator? Most irregular, whispered Lady Featherington behind her fan. I heard she speaks 7 languages, countered Mrs. Norris. And beats His Royal Highness at chess. Well, I heard, interjected Lady Whistledown, always the most informed of the gossips, that they met 3 years ago at the Middleton ball, and he's been searching for her ever since. How romantic, sighed the younger ladies, while the matchmaking mammas pursed their lips in disapproval. But Diana Montague, now installed in a handsome suite of rooms at Pemberton Palace, with a salary that ensured she would never again have to depend on the charity of others, paid little attention to the gossip. She threw herself into her new role with enthusiasm, accompanying Prince Zachary to diplomatic meetings, translating documents, and providing invaluable insights into foreign customs and traditions. And if the prince sought her company in the evenings for chess and conversation, if they were seen walking together in the palace gardens, if his eyes followed her across crowded rooms with undisguised admiration, well, that was between them and the palace staff, who had quickly grown fond of the intelligent, kind-hearted translator who treated them with respect. 6 months after Diana's arrival at the palace, Prince Zachary invited her to accompany him on a diplomatic mission to Vienna. It was there, in a quiet moment between negotiations, that he finally spoke the word she had been both hoping for and dreading. Diana, he said, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the imperial gardens, I find I can no longer maintain this pretense. Diana's heart sank. Pretense, Your Highness. That I brought you here solely for your linguistic abilities, remarkable though they are. Zachary took her hand in his. I brought you here because I could not bear to be parted from you again. Because from the moment we met at the Middleton ball, I have thought of no one else. Diana stared at him, scarcely daring to breathe. Zachary, I love you, Diana Montague, he said simply. I love your brilliant mind, your kind heart, your indomitable spirit. And I would be honored if you would consent to be my wife. Diana felt tears welling in her eyes. But I am a scholar's daughter, a former governess. You are the woman I love, Zachary interrupted firmly. The woman who speaks 7 languages, plays chess like a grandmaster, and has captured my heart as thoroughly as you captured my king in our first match. Nothing else matters. The Tun will be scandalized, Diana warned, though her heart was soaring. Let them be scandalized, Zachary replied with a grin. They'll recover, as they always do. And in the meantime, we shall be happily married. That is, if you will have me. Diana looked into his eyes, seeing there all the love and respect she had ever dreamed of finding. Yes, she said softly. Yes, Zachary, I will have you. He pulled her into his arms, and as their lips met in a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness, Diana reflected that perhaps, sometimes, fairy tales did come true, even for governesses who spoke 7 languages and played chess. Their wedding, held 3 months later at Pemberton Palace, was indeed the scandal of the season. But as Prince Zachary had predicted, the Tun eventually recovered, especially when it became clear that the new Princess of Pemberton was not only charming and intelligent but also a valuable asset to the royal family in diplomatic matters. Lady Sophia, now 12, served as a bridesmaid and continued her weekly chess lessons with Diana, who insisted that education need not end with marriage. And if the prince occasionally joined these lessons, watching his wife and his young cousin with undisguised affection, well, that was his prerogative as a husband besotted with his clever, multilingual bride. As for Diana, she found that happiness could indeed be found in the most unexpected of circumstances, even for a governess who spoke 7 languages and played chess, but who had been discovered, and loved for who she really was.